let me fall.
Since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall. Come on.
since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall.
since I found my Savior, I'm
In the name of the Father, no weapon shall prosper. I can witness to that, sitting back, looking at life. Man, I'm convinced that there had to be footprints in the sand. Cause there were times I couldn't walk and needed a helping hand. I realized that you my guide and you my therapy too. Cause in them times I couldn't walk, I know you carried me through. And I realized the sacrifice you had to bear for me too. You took my sins and died for me, my life was spared cause of you. And no matter whenever, however I call, you accepted me through. Broken down, but in you, I'm erected anew, corrected to do things to show reflection of you, a reflection of who? Christian hearts reborn and strengthened in truth, Christ. And my life is not the same no more. And I don't chill in them places I used to hang no more. I used to be the reason mama hair was hanging low, but nowadays she ain't the same no more. That's cause she know.
since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall.
since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall. Come on.
since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall.
since I found my Savior,
Yeah.
I'm made new. I'm made new. Yeah. Since I found my Savior.
I give him my all, he won't let me fall.
Since I found my Savior,
I give him my all, he won't let me fall. Come on.
what a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege it is to carry everything to God in prayer. Some things we have not because we ask not. When we have a friend who's when we're weak and heavy laden, covered with a load of care, we should never be discouraged when we take it to the Lord in prayer. Some things we have not because we ask not. When we have a friend who cares. Oh, what peace we often forfeit.
angels of Revelation 14. Today's message is how far are we from Judgment Day? How far are we from Judgment Day? God, the last three messages of love, three angels' messages of Revelation. I don't know if you can read that. Let me read it for you. Announcement number one, first angel's message. Announcement of God's judgment and call to worship our Creator. Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. Worship Him that made heaven, earth, the sea, and the fountains of water. Second message, announcement of Babylon's fall, apostate political system. Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The last message, warning not to worship the beast and not to receive its mark. If any man worship the beast and his image, receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. Our message today is the message of the first angel. I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. We're going to pause there for a minute. This angel has something specific to say, and he's saying it for a reason. These angels come in our time, in the last day. And this angel's message is, fear God and give glory to Him. Why? Because glory is being given everywhere but to Him. And you need to get it right, because the hour of His judgment is come. He didn't say it's coming. He says it's here now. The hour of His judgment is coming. He goes on to say, worship Him. Worship Him who made heaven, earth, the sea, and the fountains of water. The reason you worship Him is because He is the Creator. It is He that has made us, not we ourselves. He spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. Now, worship Him who made heaven and earth. The Bible tells us how He made it. In 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and did whatever, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. This message is vitally important. He didn't make it in 6 epochs of time. It didn't take Him millions and millions of years to make it. Although that's what so-called science teaches us. I say so-called science because they don't recognize the creation. It doesn't make any sense. The reason it doesn't make any sense is because God is a God of order. He did what He did purposely. No life can exist without life. You got to have light to have life. Am I right about it? What did He make on the first day? Let there be light. The second thing that you have to have life is to have air. That you have oxygen. On the second day, what did he make? He separated the waters above from the waters beneath. And what was between there is air. You couldn't survive without that. Everything he did in order, and he did it as it needed to be done. The third day, he separated the land from the water. And the vegetation was put in place. The vegetation couldn't survive without light and without oxygen. Huh? Then he provided the sun, moon, and stars. Because your plants again, in order to make chlorophyll, need sunlight. Am I right about it? Yes. This couldn't have been done over epochs of time. If there were millions of years between the time he made the vegetation and he made the sun, this would be a barren wasteland. It had to be consecutive days, as the Bible says. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. There couldn't have been epochs of time between the time the animals were put here and the trees and all of that were there. What would they have had to eat? Everything would have died. This angel points you back to the point and to the fact that God is the creator. And we owe him worship because it is he who made us and not we ourselves. We are not here by accident. We are not here by happenstance. There was no great explosion in space. And the gases cooled and this earth was formed. That's foolishness. It takes more faith to believe that than to believe in the beginning God. That's a lot more believable. Someone did the calculation. They said that the probability of this earth and everything on it evolving over time is the same probability as an explosion in a publishing house producing Encyclopedia Britannica. Do you recognize how complex the most simple cell is? You can study the most simple cell for the rest of your life and never learn everything there is about the most simple cell. And your body is made up of millions of cells. And each of them has their own task to do. That could not have happened by happenstance. It could not have just evolved. An intelligent being had to do that. Scientists don't understand why we die. It doesn't make sense. Every cell in your body constantly regenerates itself. You should never die. You should live forever. Amen. The only reason you die is because Adam, everybody puts the blame on Eve, but it's because Adam didn't have enough faith in God that he would give him another one just like the other one. All he saw was that most beautiful thing he'd ever seen in his life, that was bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, and he just decided, I can't live without it. I can't, I'd rather die. I'd rather die. And that's where we are today. Because Adam wasn't strong. It wasn't Eve. When God came looking for them in the cool of the evening, did he say, Eve, where art thou? Huh? Who did he call for? Because Adam was in charge. Adam had dominion. But don't get it twisted. Just get it right. Y'all get off the Eve stuff. Everybody's on Eve. It wasn't her. Because all Adam had to say was no. I know what God said. To this day, there are too many weak-kneed men who don't know how to say no. I'm going to stand for God. Huh? Don't bring me that funny smoking stuff. I don't do that. No. You ain't my wife. Yeah, looks good, but no. Huh? Too many men who won't tell their children no. We need men who will stand, know the heavens fall. Men who will be strong and stand for God. How far are we from Judgment Day is here now. This first message speaks of a judgment that is come. It's not to be confused with the judgments to come. The millennial judgment spoken of in Revelation 20 and verse 4. That's where the Bible says that we, saints, will judge angels. Meaning that we will be judging the fallen angels. The ones that fell for the okie-doke when Lucifer was talking his foolishness up in heaven. Huh? Then you have the executive judgment. The great white throne judgment that's spoken of in Revelation 20, verses 11 to 15. That's the final judgment. That's the executive judgment. That's the judgment when God dispenses out justice. When God does what the Bible calls his strange act. This judgment we speak of today is taking place now. This judgment is coming. Notice the verb of being here, the present tense. Judgment now. If there's judgment now, I want to know about it. We can be thankful today that we serve a God who never sends judgment without warning. Amos chapter 3 and verse 7 says, surely the Lord God will do nothing except he reveal it to his servants the prophets. Prophet Daniel was given a vision of judgment. In connection with this vision, he had a later vision during which he was told that the sanctuary would be cleansed in 2,300 days. Now, in order to understand the prophetic books, Daniel and Revelation, there are some symbols that you have to understand clearly. And one of them is found in Leviticus 16, verse 29, Leviticus 4, verses 1 through 7. Okay? We're not going to take the time to read all of them now. But you read them when you get a chance. These point out the fact that in dealing with prophetic times, God uses a day for a year.
Help us.
So he says the temple or the sanctuary will be cleansed in 2,300 days. What he actually was dealing with was 2,300 years. The angel Gabriel came and told him when that 2,300 years would begin. And he said that it would begin, this is in Daniel chapter 9 now, verses 21 to 27. Gave him the details of the vision. Now, before we go on, you have to recognize that in the study of prophecy, many times you have symbolic language used. The Bible, however, being its own interpreter, explains itself so that you don't have to guess as to what these symbols mean. One such is the fact that in Bible prophecy, again, we say a day is equal to a year. Let's go to Ezekiel 4 through 6. When you find it, somebody read it out loud. Ezekiel 4 4 through 6. Just stand and read it when you find it. Read it loud so we all can hear. While they're looking, somebody look up Numbers 14:34. Whoever has Ezekiel 4:46, just stand and read it. Ezekiel 4, verses 4 through 6. Ezekiel 4, verses 4 through 6.
Lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. Verse 5. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days, so shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. Verse 6. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year.
I have appointed thee each day for what?
A year.
A year. Numbers 14:34. Whoever has that, stand and read it quickly.
After they research the lane, even 40 days each day of the year. Shall you bear with it even 40 years, and ye shall know that break the promise.
All right. Bible says in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. Am I right about it? So we see that this prophecy is actually a 2,300-year prophecy. With this understanding, let's go back to Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Here the angel Gabriel informs us as to when this prophecy is to begin. All right. In verse 24, the angel sets aside for special notice 70 weeks of this 2,300-day period. Verses 25 to 27 goes into specifics as to what will take place during that 70-week period. Of special notice is verse 25, because this verse specifically points out the time when the prophecy will begin, namely from the going forth of the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem. This decree was made by Artaxerxes, king of Persia, in the fall of the year 457 BC. Therefore, we would determine the time the 70 weeks spoken of in Daniel verse 4 begins. Now, keeping in mind the daily year principle, 70 weeks would figure out to 490 prophetic days, because 7 days times 70 weeks equals 490. For those of you who wish to check me out, check my math, you can work that equation. Thus, the period spoken of in verse 24 of Daniel 9 is equal to 490 actual years. Now, in verses 25 to 27, notice that certain time limits are set during which specific events are to take place. The first segment of time mentioned in the 70 weeks are 49 years. And during this time, the walls of Jerusalem were to be rebuilt. That brings us down to 408 BC. Now notice that in BC time, that is before Christ, one moved forward in time by counting down the years. After one counts down to 1 BC, then we begin reckoning time by counting up again from 1 AD. So having made note of that, let's return to verse 25. The next segment of time mentioned is 62 weeks. 1 score equals 20. Thus 62 weeks equals 62 weeks, or 434 years. When we remember our day equals a year of prophetic time, this brings us down to the fall of the year 27 AD. Remember, we began in the fall of the year 457 BC. Now, our text said that at the end of this 69-week period, Messiah the Prince would appear. We find the fall of the year 27 AD is exactly the time that Jesus was baptized in the Jordan by John, thus beginning his earthly ministry. Okay. Now, I'm going to put a pause there, because you probably didn't get the significance of that. The prophecy says that it's dealing with the cleansing of the sanctuary. Now, In ancient Israel, there were two significant sacrifices. There was the daily sacrifice, otherwise known as the daily, and there was a yearly sacrifice, which was known as the Day of Atonement. What was it called, everybody? Day of Atonement. And that just, to break the word down, Acts 1 meant. Okay? The daily sacrifice. The head of each family in Israel would bring a sheep to the sanctuary. In the courtyard of the sanctuary, there was an altar. The altar of burnt offering. There was a big bowl of water that stood outside the tabernacle, called the laver. In that courtyard, before the altar of burnt offering, a priest would stand. He had a bowl and a knife in his hand. The head of the family would come with his lamb. He'd place his lamb on the ground in front of the priest. He would place his hands on that lamb's head, symbolically transferring the sins of he and his family to that lamb. The priest would then hand him the knife, and he would have to slit that lamb's throat from ear to ear. The purpose of that ceremony was to indelibly imprint on their mind the wages of sin is death. It was to indelibly print on their mind, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. That lamb's lifeblood poured out into the bowl. The lamb was sacrificed on that altar to burn off. The priest didn't carry that bowl to the sanctuary. He had to wash at the laver before he went into the sanctuary, lest he be unclean. He walks into the sanctuary, he has just walked into the holy place. In the holy place, there is a lamp, a 7-tiered lamp. In the holy place, there is a table with 12 loaves of bread on it, a table of showbread. There is a veil that separates the holy place from the most holy place. There is an altar in front of that veil. That's called the altar of incense. There's incense always burning on that altar. That bowl of blood that he's brought into the sanctuary, he dips his hands in that blood, he puts some on the horns of the altar of incense, and then he sprinkles on the veil that separates the holy from the most holy, which is why the incense is constantly burning, because the blood is accumulating on that veil for 360 days. That blood is accumulating on that veil. You have the smell of death. The wages of sin is, and so that incense, which represents the prayers of God's people, covers up that smell of death. Then on the Day of Atonement, there are two goats. One is the Lord's goat, the other one is the scapegoat. The Lord's goat is sacrificed. But this time he didn't go and sprinkle it on the veil. This time the high priest goes within the veil. He has a cord tied around his waist. Because if there's one person who had confessed their sin, and he walks in that veil, he would drop dead. And they got the rope because they can't go in there. He's the only one who can go in there. The other priests go in there, they will drop dead. They got that rope on there so they can haul him out if he dropped dead. But this was a serious thing. People afflicted their souls. They fasted and they prayed. They wanted to make sure that their sins had been forgiven. They didn't want to be responsible for the high priest dying. So now he goes within the veil. And the blood from that sacrifice goat, the Lord's goat, he sprinkles on the mercy seat.
Yes.
The mercy seat was a gold covering on the Ark of the Covenant. Underneath that mercy seat was the law of God. And above that mercy seat was a fire that burned. That was God's presence himself, which is why he dropped dead and he went in there with sin on him. Because God's very presence was there, the Shekinah glory. And so he sprinkles the blood on the mercy seat. And the sins of the people now have been atoned for. Now he comes out of the most holy place. And that second goat is out there. That goat didn't sacrifice. The priest takes his bloody hands and puts them on that goat. And they send it out to the wilderness to die. Tradition says he was led to the edge of the cliff where he plunged to his death. And a runner would run back to the camp. They had runners staged along the way. And each runner would tell the runner that he was coming to, it is finished. And that one would run to the next one, it is finished. To the next one, it is finished. Until they got back to camp. And the last runner would come into camp and cry out, it is finished. And there'd be great rejoicing in the camp. Because their sins had been forgiven. The sanctuary had been cleansed. That was the cleansing of the earthly sanctuary. This prophecy, this 2,300-year prophecy, is dealing with the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. When Jesus came down to the river to be baptized, what did John say? Say it again. They can hear you. Say it loud.
God who takes away the sin of another God.
Behold, the Lamb of God who taketh away the sin of the world.
Yeah.
Jesus was the Lamb.
Yes.
When Jesus died on the cross, he was the fulfillment of that sanctuary ceremony. Amen. But the lamb was sacrificed in the courtyard. Yes. But Jesus was the lamb in the holy place because he's the light of the world. Yes. Jesus was the bread on the table because he's the bread of life. Yes. Yes. Jesus was the priest who walked into the sanctuary and sprinkled blood on the veil. Jesus was the priest who went into the most holy place and sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat. What's happening right now is that Jesus is in heaven. If you add up the years of this prophecy, the Bible says, let me not run ahead. Let me not run ahead. I wanted to make sure you understood everything before I got to this. But we find ourselves in the 70th week of the prophecy. Looking back at verse 24, we had several events that took place. All right, I'm past all that. Where am I now? Okay, we find that at the end of the time frame, an end, here we go. An end was to be made of sins, that reconciliation was to be made for iniquity, and that the vision and the prophecy would be sealed up or completed. What vision? What prophecy? Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, thou shalt bruise its heel. What vision? What prophecy? Numbers 24:17. I see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. What vision? What prophecy? Isaiah 9:6-7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. Look back at verse 27. We read that he, meaning the Messiah, the Prince, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of that week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Let's look at the second part first. We find that the baptism of Christ took place in the fall of AD 27. Well, 3.5 years from then, in the spring of AD 31, Jesus was crucified, cut off in the midst of the final prophetic week, thus making reconciliation for iniquity, bringing in everlasting righteousness. He also caused the sacrifice and oblation to cease. For we read in Matthew 27, verse 51, Mark 15, verse 38, Luke 23, verse 45, that the veil in the temple that separated the holy place from the most holy place was ripped from top to bottom. The lamb that was about to be sacrificed ran away. The people were able to gaze into the Holy of Holies for the first time ever. By his death, Jesus put an end, made null and void the sacrificial system, because it found its fulfillment, the end to its purpose in Jesus. Thus the covenant that was made with Adam and Eve and passed on down the ages, the promise of a Redeemer was fulfilled. 3.5 years later, the Jewish nation finalized their rejection of Christ's sacrifice by the stoning to death of Stephen, the first Christian martyr, in the year AD 34. From this point, the Jews openly and actively persecuted Christ's followers, and Christians began to actively evangelize non-Jews. Up to that point, they thought salvation was only for the Jews. But after the stoning of Stephen, which coincided with a vision that God gave Peter, where a sheep came down from heaven, and he saw all these animals, all these unclean animals on that sheep, and said, he heard a voice saying, "Arise, Peter, slay and eat." And he said, "Not so, Lord. I don't eat anything that's common or unclean." And the vision came back again, "Arise, Peter, slay and eat." And he said again, "Not so, Lord." Now, there are a bunch of people who don't know any better who think that that means you can go eat whatever you want to. That ain't what that text is saying. They didn't finish reading. You keep on reading. And the angel tells Peter, there's some men coming to the house. Follow them, go with them when they come. And no sooner did the angel speak than 2 men knocked at the door. He followed the men. They took him to a Gentile's house, a Roman centurion by the name of Cornelius. And Cornelius accepted the gospel, and he and his whole family were baptized. And after they were baptized, Peter says, "I now perceive that God is no respecter of persons." It had nothing to do with Eden. It had to do with God breaking down prejudice and bigotry in the early church. In the early church, they thought that only Jews could be saved. They considered Gentiles or non-Jews to be dogs, to be unclean. And that's why God gave him the vision, to show him, don't call anything that I made unclean. They're just as much mine as you are. Huh? Didn't Jesus say, "Other sheep I have, which are not of this folk. Them I also must bring. So the point of that vision was that the gospel should be preached to everybody, not just the Jews alone. So now, from this point, they openly and actively evangelize non-Jews. The Jewish nation, at this point, ceased to be God's chosen people, though they could still be saved individually. As a nation, they had rejected Jesus. And as Jesus himself stated in Matthew 23, verse 38, the last time he was in the temple, he said, "Behold your house." Up to this time, every time he'd go into the temple, he said, "My Father's house. My Father's house. You've made my Father's house a den of thieves. My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer for all people." But that last time, he said, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." Why? Because they had rejected the King of Glory. They had turned their back on the Son of God. Desolate because in 70 AD, the Roman legions of the Emperor Vespasian reduced the city and the temple to rubble. And just as Jesus had prophesied in Matthew 24:2, not one stone was left upon another. The year 34 AD brings us to the end of that 490-year segment highlighted by the angel's clarification. If you now subtract 490 years from 2,300 years, we find ourselves with 1,810 years left. If you add AD 34 to that 1,810 years, it will bring us down to the year 1844. Thus we find that the cleansing of the sanctuary spoken of in Daniel 8:14 began in 1844. What sanctuary was being cleansed? It couldn't be the sanctuary in Jerusalem. It was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. That would leave only the sanctuary in heaven. I need somebody to find Hebrews 4:14, 15, and 16. When you find it, stand and read it. I need somebody else to find Hebrews 8, chapter 8, verse 1 and 2, and then verses 4 through 6. Hebrews 4:14, 15, and 16. Okay, just hold on, and get the rest of them out. Hebrews 8, 1, 2, 4, and 6. Who has that? Okay, and then the last one is Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1, verses 9 through 14, and verses 24 through 28. Okay, all right, whoever has Hebrews 4:14, 15, and 16, stand and read it.
Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heaven, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmity, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need.
Hebrews 8. Who has that one? Hebrews 8, 1, 2, and 4 through 6.
Verse 1, now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, verse 2, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and not man.
Say that again.
Which the Lord pitched and not man. The man did not make this one. In verse 6?
Yes.
Okay, he said.
Verses 4 through 6.
Okay. For if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, said he, that thou make all things according to the pattern shown to thee in the mountains. Verse 6. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises.
All right. chapter 9, verses 1, 9 through 14, and 24 to 28. Whoever has it, stand and read it. Chapter 9, verse 1, and then verses 9 through 14, and then 24 to 28.
And then buried, first covenant had also ordinance of divine servants and worldly sanctuary.
Verse 9 through 14.
Which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gift and sacrifice. They could not make him that did service perfect, that pertaining to the conscience, which stood only in meats and drinks, and divers washings, and carnal ordinances, imposed on them until time of reformation. And Christ being come, and high priest of good things to come, by greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered and once into the holy place, and ordained eternal redemption for us. For the blood of bulls and of goats and of ashes and hyper sprinkling unclean sanctified and purifying of the flesh.
Verse 24 to 28. Verse 24 to 28, that's the last segment.
For Christ does not enter into the holy place, made with hands, which are figures, true, within the heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor that he should offer himself as a high priest enter into the holy place every year with blood of blood. But then he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now to the end of the world has appeared, put away the sin, and sacrifice himself. And as he appointed of the men, once to die, after death, after this the judgment. The Christ shall once offer to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin and salvation. Amen.
All right. So now, in 1844, Jesus, who had been serving in the holy place in heaven, stepped out of the holy place and went into the most holy place. How do you know that, Pastor? Because the temple on earth was patterned after the one in heaven. What was the service in the temple on earth? The daily sacrifice was performed in the holy place. But the day of the cleansing of the sanctuary, the day of atonement, took place in the most holy place. So then, in 1844, Jesus stepped out of the holy place into the most holy place. What has he been doing? This judgment is called the investigative judgment. What is he investigating? Well, I read somewhere that thrones were sat down and the books were opened. What books are we talking about? God keeps books. I don't know if you knew it. God keeps books. From what will we be judged? There are several books that the Bible speaks about. One of the books that the Bible talks about is the book of remembrance. The book of remembrance. That is a book where God puts down everything. I remember somebody, they used to sing a song back in the day, that God sees all you do, he hears all you say. My God is writing all the time. There are angels whose job is to record what goes on in our life. Not only is there a book of remembrance, there's a book of personal identification. Didn't Jesus say the very hairs of your head are numbered? He knows you so well, he knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows how many are turned gray. He knows how many are fallen out. But not only is there a book of identification, there is also a book of personal description. Okay, now let me give you the scriptures for these, because y'all think I'm making this up on top of my head. Okay, Malachi 3, 16 to 18. Write that down. Psalm 87, 4 through 6. Write that one down. Psalm 139, verse 15 and 16. Revelation 20 and verse 15. Jeremiah 17 and verse 13. This is where I got these books from. I didn't make this up off the top of my head. All right. The fourth book is the book of life. The Lamb's book of life. And the last book is the book of the earth, or the book of death. Revelation 20, verse 12, the books were open. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. The question is your name written on the page bright and fair? In the book of the kingdom, is your name written there? Either your name is going to be there, or your sin is going to be there. If your sin is there and you've accepted Jesus, your sin is blotted out and your name is written there. But if you reject Jesus, then your name is blotted out and it's transferred to the book of the earth, the book of death. Question is, are you on the Lord's side? Huh? I saw men both great and small standing before the throne. And the book was open. The book of life and the book of death. Whatever name was judged was written in one book or the other. Either the book of life or the book of death. Have you washed the robe and made it white in the blood of the Lamb? Huh? Anyone whose name was not found in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Well, the lake of fire is the second death. That speaks for itself. You don't have to go out like that. Jesus asked a question. Choose life. Why would he die? When Jesus shall gather the nations before him at last to appear, then how shall we stand in the judgment when summoned our sentence to hear? Shall we hear from the lips of the Savior the word, faithful servant, well done? Or trembling with fear and anguish be banished away from his throne? When he smiles, when he looks on his children and sees the ransom he sealed, he'll clothe them in heavenly beauty, as low at his footstep they kneel. He'll gather the wheat in his garment, but the chaff he will scatter away. Then how shall we stand in the judgment on that great resurrection day? In that great day, people, in that great day, God's going to rain down fire. He's going to stand in the middle of the air to judge the quick and the dead. Early one of these mornings, God's going to call for Gabriel, that tall, bright angel Gabriel. And God's going to say to him, Gabriel, blow your silver trumpet and wake the living nation. And Gabriel's going to ask him, Lord, how loud must I blow it? And God's going to tell him, Gabriel, blow it calm and easy, putting one foot on the mountaintop and the other in the middle of the sea. Gabriel's going to stand and blow his horn to wake the living nations. Then God's going to say to him, Gabriel, blow one more blow on your silver trumpet and wake the nations underground. And Gabriel's going to ask him, Lord, how loud must I blow it? And God's going to tell him, Gabriel, like 7 peals of thunder.
Yes, sir.
Then that tall, bright angel Gabriel will put one foot on the battlements of heaven and the other on the steps of hell, and blow that silver trumpet till he shakes old hell's foundation. And I feel the old earth is shudder, and I see the graves are bursting, and I hear a sound, a bone-chilling sound. What's that sound I hear? It's like the clicking together of dry bones, bone to bone to dry bones. And I see coming out of the bursting graves, marching up from the valley of death, the army of the dead. And the living and dead in the blinking of an eye are caught up in the middle of the air before God's judgment bar. Oh, sinner, where will you stand in that great day when God's going to rain down fire? Gambling man, where will you stand? Homehungering man, where will you stand? Liars and backsliders, where will you stand in that great day when God's going to rain down fire? God will divide the sheep from the goats, the one on the right and the other on the left. God's going to say to the right, enter into my kingdom. Those who come through great tribulation and wash their robes in the blood of the Lamb, they will enter in. Clothed in spotless white, starry crowns on their heads, silver slippers on their feet, harps in their hands. 2 by 2 they'll walk up and down the golden street, feasting on milk and honey, singing the songs of Zion, chattering with the angels all around the great white throne. But to them on the left, God is going to say, depart from me into everlasting darkness, down into the bottomless pit. The wicked like lumps of lead will start to fall. Headlong they'll fall, plumb through the black, red-hot mouth of hell, belching out fire and brimstone. Their cries like howling, yelping dogs will go up from the fiery smoke from hell, but God will stop his ears. Too late, sinner, too late. Goodbye, sinner, goodbye. In hell, sinner, beyond the reach of the love of God. I hear your voice crying, their time shall be no more. Time shall be no more. Time shall be no more. The sun will go out like a candle in the wind. The moon will turn to dripping blood. The stars will fall like cinders. The sea will burn like tar. The earth will melt away and be dissolved. The sky will roll up like a scroll. With the wave of his hand, God will blot out time and start the wheel of eternity. Sinner, oh sinner, where will you stay in that great day when God is going to send down fire? Choose life. Why will you die?